The Metro Nashville Police Department today concluded its investigation into the Covenant School attack, which was committed over 2 years ago, March 27th, 2023, by, and I don't use her name very often, but I will in this context, 28-year-old Audrey Elizabeth Hale. Audrey Elizabeth Hale, and I'm referencing reporting from the Tennessee Star and the Michael Patrick Leahy organization over there. I think Tom Pappert wrote this story, but I also have the actual report pulled up for you as well, as I have run. I've not read all 48 pages of it. I've gotten through a good portion of the report. Here's what I will say before we get into the details. This is a fruitless exercise. That is not to say that we should not have all information, at least as much information as we can possibly have, that would not put the health and safety of other people at risk. But I thought a couple of things as I was reading some of this report. One thing struck me. Covenant, the word covenant. We have talked about the Covenant School quite a bit over the last couple of years, and rightly so. What does that word mean? Covenant. Well, it means agreement. That's what a covenant is. And in the context of a Christian school or a church, that covenant is an agreement between ourselves, the sinful, and our Savior. In this case, Jesus Christ. But I was thinking about the word covenant in a broader context, or I guess, depending on your perspective, a more limited context. Covenant, the agreement. What covenant do we have with the Metro Nashville Police Department? What covenant do we have with those elected officials regarding information like this? Who are they to shield us, grown people, from this information? Because all along the way, it seems that is what they have attempted to do. Why? Well, they tell us that it's because they don't want copycat killers in our midst. They tell us that this information has been withheld because we just don't need to know. There's no community interest that places a value on this information that we oftentimes over the last 2 years called a manifesto. I'm trying to get away from using that term because of the 80-plus pages that I have been witness to and of the multitude of other journals and pages and writings of this individual. One thing is clear. This is not a manifesto by any traditional understanding of the term. What it is, these are the writings of someone who is mentally insane and very, very angry. Now, some of you and some of us, I'll include myself in this number, we want to believe that the information that was withheld for so long was withheld for a specific reason. Because Audrey Hale identified as transgender. And that there was an active movement to prevent any and all information coming out about the nature of her violent crimes and what her belief in her transgenderism had to do with that. I don't know that I'm convinced with that. I don't know that I'm convinced of that. And I know that sadly, an absence of information leads to speculation. Let me say that again. I say it all the time. You just write it down, put a little Matt Murphy underneath there. An absence of information leads to speculation. And in the absence of a forthcoming Metro Nashville Police Department, in their concerted effort to shield us from this information, speculation blossomed. And you add that concept that an absence of information leads to speculation. In any dynamic, by the way, in any dynamic, if there is interest in something when you do not have good information or you feel like information is being withheld from you, that leads us to speculate as to what's going on. What's really happening and why? And then add this to it. For the last 2 years in our community, and this has happened in other communities around the country, we know them by name, Uvalde, Parkland, Sandy Hook. We see acts of violence occur. We call them senseless acts of violence. And then we proceed to attempt to make sense of the senseless. We defined it as senseless, yet we attempt to make sense of it. I feel compelled on this day that the final report has come out from the Metro Nashville Police Department as they have concluded their investigation to say this one more time. There is no way that sane people can make sense of someone shooting a 9-year-old child in cold blood. There's no amount of conversation. There's no amount of information. I don't fault anyone for trying. I don't fault people for being curious. I do not fault anyone from wanting this information on the basic premise, and this is kind of where I fall, that it is not the government's right to shield us from this information. It is our right as a public to know and determine for ourselves whether or not we are ready, willing, and able to handle what we see. But there's no making sense of this. A mentally disturbed person that decided that she was a man at some point in her life killed children in cold blood and had been planning it for a long, long time. Not necessarily the specific nature of this specific attack happening on March 27th of 2023, but had been planning killing people for a long, long time. There's no making sense of that. And I'm not wagging my finger. I try to do it too. We all try to do it. Not just in this case. This case hits close to home because these are our neighbors. These are our friends. These are people we go to church with. These are people that we see at the grocery store. And then the usual suspects come out of their corners and, one group of people, and I'm not knocking any of it, but one group of people start screaming about mental health and another group of people start screaming about gun control. And somewhere along the way, we lose sight of what has happened and perhaps some of the red flags that existed that could have led us to a point where we got this clearly disturbed human being some help, or at very least locked her up and shielded her from innocence that eventually died as a result of our inability to do so. People want a magic bullet. Oh, I want to know if Audrey Hale was on medication. According to, we don't see any medication, at least in the reporting that I've read. I've not read all of it. I've read about 22 pages of it. I've not seen it. But what is that going to do for you? Well, I want to know. Well, you know what? There are a lot of people on a lot of psychotropic drugs. And I'm not saying they should be or they shouldn't be, but those people don't go out and kill other people. Sense of the senseless. I don't know that there is any specific puzzle piece that we can be handed as a community that's going to fit perfectly into that jigsaw puzzle of this story that's going to make it make sense for you. And I know that's frustrating. It is for me. And in the meantime, the community heals and life goes on, and 6 families, and by extension, the entire Nashville family will never be the same. And have we done anything with regard to mental health? I don't know the answer to that either. Of note, as the Tennessee Star put it, the Metro Nashville Police Department did not use the word transgender in their report, but they did acknowledge that Hale had gender dysphoric issues, specifically identified as male and used he and him as preferred pronouns. The report also acknowledged Hale made statements about wanting to transition genders, and then went on to say nothing has been found to suggest he initiated or was undergoing a transition at the time of her death, including medical documentation. In other words, there's no documentation to indicate that there was any medical or medicine being consumed by Hale. Hale had been a mental patient for a long time. There ought to have been red flags within the psychiatric community that directly dealt with Hale, one would think. But those flags were missed. Does that mean that the people that missed them are bad people? I don't think it does. Not necessarily. It might not. We have to be right 100% of the time. They have to be right once. $56.58, I don't know what that means. Vanderbilt omission for 2 years is the key to the entire story. I'll need you to explain that for me. A lot of you have responded on the super text line. I wish I had more answers for you. I don't. There are no answers for this story. There are no answers in this story. There are plenty of people that think that they have them. There are plenty of people on the radio. I'm not talking about Dan or Chris or Chad or anybody. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. There are plenty of people that would suggest that they know exactly how it happened and how it went down. And that is all a load of garbage. This woman was mentally unstable for a long, long time. The writings that we have seen indicated that instability, her inability to figure it out, her inability to get the bugs out of her head, led to a tremendous amount of anger. Anger at everybody. And that would, manifest itself in lashing out at this group or that group. And it all seems so indiscriminate. I don't know. Some of you are suggesting, or some of you would suggest, not you, I wouldn't say it, but there's been suggestion that she was crazy because she was trans. I would suggest that she tried to be trans because she was crazy and thought that would fix her, and it didn't.